Hello, my name is Victoria Marshall, and my project is on HIV/AIDS. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, and AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency virus. HIV is a retrovirus. It came originally from chimpanzees, and humans got it from eating chimp meat or tainted blood from the chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees originally got it from eating a type of monkey, and that's how they got HIV. And it is a fatal disease. It manifests itself by usually cancer or some type of pneumonia. The HIV genome has 2 envelope proteins, 3 structural proteins, and 3 viral enzymes that are part of its makeup. It uses reverse transcriptase to trick the cell into letting it attach, and once it infects the body, it rapidly goes through the body, and it affects the CD4 T cell, and that's an important reservoir for the HIV. It's kind of where it likes to hide out, and it gains entry into the cell by the GP120 envelope of the HIV binding to the CD4 receptors of the CD4 cells. The viral membrane fuses the host membrane with it, and it releases the viral particles into the cytoplasm, and from there it can affect the rest of your T cells, and it can also hurt your B cells. And HIV is usually spread through sexual contact, and usually through blood, by transfusions or people that share intravenous drug use with needles. It can also be transferred through semen, menstrual period blood, and breast milk. Injecting drug users are the most vulnerable to HIV because of the contaminated needles. And when they use those contaminated needles, if they've already got HIV, then they just pass it back and forth and to everyone that uses it. That's why it's important in the hospitals that a lot of times people throw it away in the biohazard bag so that people cannot pull those needles out and start using them out of the trash can. Drug use makes it easier to spread, and the same with sexual contact. Some signs are inflammations, and they get lesions, also fatigue. In the beginning stages, there's fatigue. Later signs are the inflammation and the lesions, and sometimes they can develop Kaposi's sarcoma, which is a type of cancer, and it causes bruising on the outside of the skin. Sterile needles are being given out now to try to help keep drug users from spreading it by giving them clean, sterile needles. I think that's a terrible idea, however, because people still, in a pinch, will try to use a used needle, and then, of course, they get sick. With HIV, meth and cocaine users are the most at risk, as well as heroin needle users. Having multiple sex partners also increases your chance of getting HIV, because you never know who's telling the truth or who's lying unless there's a blood test done to show. So multiple sex partners puts you more at risk, because the more people you sleep with, the more likely you are to get HIV. And women can actually pass it to their unborn babies. And it is a very serious disease. And elderly people now are more at risk for HIV because they're living longer. And the baby boomer generations are at risk. And this poses a lot of healthcare challenges because now have to figure out how to give them medication to keep them surviving longer and longer as well. And they're just as much risk as a child is. And getting tested for HIV is important. Most doctors recommend getting tested whether you think you've been exposed or not. They will usually test for that alongside other STDs. And believe it or not, some STDs can also make it easier for you to get HIV if your immune system is already compromised. AZT was the first antiretroviral drug for AIDS. It was given in the 70s and 80s, and it was the first known drug to help kind of slow down HIV. And in 2002, nevirapine is a drug used to lessen mother-to-child transmission. And in 2012, Truvada is the first FDA-approved drug to help slow down, if not stop, the transmission of HIV from person to person. And they use a lot of RT inhibitors to keep HIV at bay, to keep it from being transferred. If they're not able to stop the HIV with medication, and these antivirals do not work, then most people end up getting AIDS. And once they get AIDS, most of the time, that's when they get the pneumonias and the opportunistic secondary infections like pneumonia, cancers, different things, like any kind of disease you can imagine possibly they could probably get. Some interesting facts I found out while I researched HIV and AIDS was that in 2007, I know this was a while ago, but in 2007, approximately 33.2 million people were living with HIV and AIDS still. Even with the medicines that they were being given, they were still living with it. And less people were dying, which is great news for the future. In the past 25 years, it has infected 65 million people, and in most HIV campaigns, they constantly speak about get tested, get tested, get tested. It's very important to get tested, but it's also important to make sure that whoever you're having sexual contact with, if you choose to have sexual contact, make sure that they're also being tested to keep you from getting it. And particularly for populations at risk. Sometimes certain risk groups, these interventions do not work, unfortunately, and so people are still passing away, unfortunately, from AIDS. And sometimes false positives do happen. That's a drawback to the testing part, is you can be told you're positive and then you're negative, and vice versa. You could be told it's negative and you're positive. And people still see HIV positive diagnosis as a death sentence. It's very sad. In my research, I saw that a lot of times most people get depression and they will kill themselves when they find out they have HIV still. And there's still a lot of major bias towards HIV. People still refuse to be around people or hug them, and it's really sad because it's not spread through saliva, just, semen and vaginal secretions, but saliva, you can't even get it from saliva. That's one disease that you cannot get from saliva, surprisingly. But sadly, in 2007 as well, 330,000 children died from AIDS. That's a lot of children. Unfortunately, it's not just adults, it's not just the elderly, it's also our children. And sub-Saharan Africa has more than 2/3 of the world's cases of HIV/AIDS still, and they are the leading cause of AIDS. The U.S. still has a pretty high number of people that have it as well, even to this day. And even, believe it or not, with the elderly, the erectile dysfunction medicine plays a part in why the baby boomers are getting HIV/AIDS, because they're living longer, they have things to make them able to have more sexual contact with multiple people. Therefore, they are also at risk